Do you want to be a bugbear to your opponent? Do you want some freedom in your lists? Do you like cherry on your Coke? Do you feel like you have two sides to you but you're calm and collected? If you said yes to any one of my bad puns, then Ariadna's All-Stars is the faction for you. Hello and welcome to my video covering the units of Kosmoflot, the newest sectorial for Ariadna, and the most recently added to the game alongside Starmada. And it is a fantastic sectorial with a wide selection of units and capabilities, often described as Ariadna's high-tech sectorial and Caledonia's successor. Kosmoflot has taken the meta by storm. Even if you're not a meta player, I think there's a lot in here to have fun with your friends thanks to flexible links, solid solo and linked pieces, and lots of cheap pieces you can throw into the list. Remember, if you like what I have to say, like the video and subscribe for more. There is a prevailing thought in the game that outside of hack and even inside hack, doctors aren't great unless they have some sort of gimmick or some kind of use. The medkit is practically better. In Cosmo we have two units with cubes, so re-rolling stuff thanks to doctors is out. And we have pretty high physical scores across the board. Rockouts, our line infantry for example, have a score of 11. One you might want to bring back Wallace, and the other is degrading, so you kind of don't want to bring it back. So honestly, I recommend paramedics / using the medkits instead of these doctors, which is why I'm not recommending the 112 on foot or the Kazakh doctor. One can't link and has a better motorbike version. The other can link and will ruin purity in a link which a paramedic does so much better. The 112 is a great model and you should buy it if you like it, but it'll be for when my motorized 112 gets off his bike. If you're going to bring one of them, then I recommend you do it with a PAL bot so you can sneak up the board and heal stuff hiding these two units. It's not exceptional without cubes though. The 112 motorized though brings a fast solo specialist with a medkit to Kosmoflot, basically taking the 1-1 on Toop who's a bit naff, then making him fast. I've talked about it in Caledonia and I really like this unit, and in principle it should be okay. He's improved now that he's mimetic and can take cover, which is really nice, making it easy to get a -6 to hit him if you get unlucky. He has no arm but he's 8-4, so fly quick before getting hit. The other issue is the massive base, but that's fine in some maps. I've not had much luck personally with him, but for 19 points I feel like that's okay, and it may be a bit of a learning curve to speed up the board and not get shot in his behind. Use him to pick up bears or with either the doctoring or the medkit. Just be careful, he's only BS 11. Maybe I like this unit more than he is worth, but I think he could be useful just to run up to a pre-smoke objective to get that point. Dozers are kind of worth it now in Kosmoflot, as we have two hackable heavy infantry to recover, two remotes that might actually see play. Ironic now that the dozer is no longer attacks for them, and a tag. This means with a helper bot he can do a lot for cheaper than the mechanic who is paying for the linking ability and armor. The important note here is that he is BS 11 with a gizmo kit and a Whip 13 engineer, something not all our engineers can have. So profile wise he's got a Blitzen, an acrylic cannon, which means he can be a sort of disposable ARO piece, or he can be part of a coordinated order, otherwise he's really not going to be shooting. Honestly, I take the disposable because we have other D-charge users. But really, he's not here to pew pew, he's here to repair a toll reaction bot or a missile bot, or use a helper bot to pick up a status stripper or repair the Chernobog back to working order so it stays fresh. In general, if you want an engineer for a tag list and you have 14 to 16 points to spare, take him and the bot and to get the most use out of him. I also think he pairs well with an Urian on ARO, since when that goes down you can pick it back up thanks to remote presses, and that's still a lot of armor and wounds to chew through. But you're taking it mostly for the tag. Oh, and his position with sort of Armandinos and mechanics, they move forward. The dozer is cheap enough just to leave him behind and generate some orders. So, for Tovliks, I'm much more enamoured with them now post-Highlander. It's really a nice toolbox unit with veteran, mimeticism, and plus very good links with the Soldat and the Scots Guard, meaning a fire team of them can have just a little bit of everything. Every profile has assault pistols, which is expensive, but it means they're quite good at close range, assuming there are no templates. Profile wise, we have 2 engineers, no gizmo chits, but decharges and T2 rifles and an option to take a light rocket launcher, which can be very nice ARO pieces as no one wants to eat a continuous template. The paramedic is sadly outshone, except in pure cores, by a Stranic, but it's nice to have. The AP Spitfire, which is in my opinion overshone by the Scots Guard and Unknown Ranger, again unless you're doing a pure core, and even then I'm not sure why you would be doing that. The heavy rocket launcher is cheap and not awful, but it could be a nice ARO piece with the Mimeticism and armor too. My second or third favourite profile is that of the AP Sniper with MSV1, which is so nice in Ariadnia, which means we can now fight mimetic targets without suiciding Galwegians or massive pure links. We're not great at shooting, but this guy alongside maybe a Stranic and Scots Guard AP Spitfire or an Unknown Ranger is really nice for those long-ranged ARO pieces. Finally, the overall platform of Veteran, which is good in case of loss of Lieutenant, which is hard because we have Chain of Command in the army, BS-12, which is fine for Ariadnia, and Arm 2, it's okay. You really hope the Frontovlics win the face-to-face, but I always take one if I'm doing something like Assault at Harris, because they just bring so much to the table. Alright, Caterans. To update the Caledonia review of this unit, don't use them in IRO, it's not worth it. We have the Volcalat, Shock Troop, and we have Scots Guards for that. No, their big thing is Climbing Plus and Surprise Attack. You get one use of it, sure, but it's really easy to blast things at a -9. They're less disposable here, thanks to availability to 2 instead of 4 in Caledonia, but at the same time, I think it can be worth it as a drop zone to drop zone, or drop zone to midfield piece to snipe anything without 6 sense, or MSV, with that Climbing Plus and Camel to sneak into the best position to do what you need to do. My original point still stands. At CC22 with no Natural Born Warrior or Martial Arts, BS-12 and some okay weaponry, it's more like a warband with a sniper rifle and Camel. You can use the Climbing Plus to aggressively position yourself to snipe and trade up if need be, or sneak into close combat and surprise some misplaced trooper and hit them with Surprise Attack and an APCCW. My recommendation is to take one and use it to scalpel your opponent or sandbag them with yet another Camel piece they have to deal with. Mechanics. So I'm kind of a bit mixed on them. 17 points for a linked engineer, but you still get a pure linked BS-14 AP heavy pistol engineer with EM mine layer, which is nice to defend your main core from getting impersonated or uxia'd. Or a core linked Panzerfaust to take on a tag. Fizz and BS-11 with Whip 13 and Arm 2 means it's a nice little pocket engineer for a pure core in case they get hit with EM, or if you have an aggressive core to grab objectives. Really, I think 17 points is a lot here for a Rock-Up Fireteam Specialist, but you do get quite a lot of kit. And in general, I take them when I need an engineer for cards or missions or drop zone defense, and I have some points to spare in a Rock-Up Volcalat core. Paracommandos are odd for me. I don't like airborne deployment. I think rolling for deployment is a con, in my probably very wrong opinion. Even he can't do that. And even a regular parachutist that shares a faction with equipping Mirage 5 can be zoned out very easily. However, I do like this one. Why? Well, its stats are kind of good. It's more Hack Islam than Ariadnia as it sits with Ballistic Skill 12, Whip 14 with 3 specialist options and Min -3. This means he can push buttons and tussle with some things very well in the midfield. Usually you'll have a Flash Pulse or Forward Observer, so that 14 is actually doing something. Or you're a paramedic to pick up Wallace or Bears if absolutely necessary. Profile-wise, I kind of only consider the last 4. The AP Spitfire is a really worrying thing to come down and start attacking stuff from the sides. The Boarding Shotgun Forward Observer and +1 damage option comes with decharges to do cards and Flash Pulses to maybe force some sticky pieces to hide. It's a bit short range for 1 wound, but it will need to do. Alternatively, you can just forward observe something so the next piece can come along and outshoot it. Finally is the Paramedic SMG, which adds some burst which you can use to move him into a specific spot and suppressive fire, or you can run and grab a box or a wounded soldier. Either way, I like him as a third midfield trooper, to use alongside Bears and SAS to lean into Ariadnia's asymmetry, and he offers far more decisions that you can make and far more potential dilemmas for your opponent. Our first bear, and oh boy is it a slightly contentious one. Well, as in, do we take this or do we just take the irregular bear if you can only get one? So this has 2 order generating models, not in a duo, not a peripheral, just 2 models at once, and that's all that brings, like equipping Mirage Fight. The controller first, she is a 9-point, Arm 2, light shotgun order generator. I have seen worse, I have seen better. She's a point and slot tax for bringing the regular bear. Right, the bear. The argument is the regular or irregular / impetuous bear. Impetuous gives you a better gun, a free order for the bear, and is generally considered the go-to furry missile. It's fine. The regular one gets a worse gun, but grenades, which is big and can take cover. Also very big. The irregular one I'll talk a bit about later, but now I'll specifically cover why you should take this one. So why am I speaking so highly of this 23-point chain rifle lad or lady? Well, they're Arm 5, totally immune, 2 wounds, and they're dogged, which means it's very, very hard to put down. You need a lot of burst at damage 15 or 16 to really threaten it. And when you do hit it, you have to do 2.5 wounds to put it down. Oh, and he will dodge on 16 or he will smoke dodge on 19s. Viral or Breaker will be your best bet to kill this thing, but good luck having that outside of Pack Islam. It will 10-inch berserk you in its active turn, so make sure that you keep that range perfectly to stop that from happening. And if you're within 8 inch, it may just template you with its chain rifle or punt a grenade on you at 19. Oh, and last point unique to this one, since it's not impetuous, it can take cover. So that means it's basically an Arm 8 model, and that's immutable. You can try and template it, but that just removes cover armor and it may dodge it. It means you need some really high Mormor or Gecko level damage to kill it, and even then it's rough. This is why I like him. The irregular bear is threatening, no doubt about it, but this one you can move into the midfield and just be a sort of beacon of, shoot me or I will berserk you. And while your opponent has to pour orders into it wrongly, your SAS can boot buttons for points. Oh, and if they ignore you, you just go hunt stuff with Climbing Plus and Berserk, which is silly now with the new rules. And if your opponent leaves like a tag out that you can hunt, well, you will kill it with damage 18, double action, or AP. If your opponent hunts him, well, like I said earlier, he's very difficult to kill, and that will just pickle your opponent 6 ways to Sunday. Raveneye Officer, an 012 unit that post-Raveneye that is now in Corregidor, Military Orders, and Kosmoflot. It's a cheap drop zone mine layer. Basically, always take the EM profile and laugh because it's a specialist, mine layer, template, and flashbulb user. Less of an absolute steal than an MO, but it's still a bargain. My recommendation is the same as the Military Orders review. Take one. Take it if you have slots and points. It's worth taking over a plain unlinked Rocket. Yes, it's only an SMG and BS11, but he has a Flash Pulse, Forward Observer, and Whip 13, which means he's not bad in ARO. So, the light infantry of Kosmoflot, and they're a little odd. And it's not just the hats. They're like a slightly more premium version of volunteers, which I love, but they're still BS10 and lack SWC weapons. But there's a reason for that, but we'll do the profiles first. Courage in Armor 1 is nice, but odd. The chain rifle LSG is just the same as the volunteer, but it costs more. SMG grenades and D-charges is nice, as it has a Fizz 11. The light shotgun rifle profile exists for some reason. I'm not really sure of its purpose. We have an AP marksman rifle profile, which is really nice to have, but it's only BS 13 in a pure link core, which it is cheap as chips though. Looking at 47 points for the most penny-pinching loadout, or 50 with a paramedic. It might be the cheapest marksman rifle in the game, but let me know if I'm wrong on that. We do have Forward Observer and paramedic profiles, which is nice, especially if you want to stun someone on 13s. We do get infiltrating camo options like Ariadna's Line Infantry, which is a good way to be a thorn in your opponent's side with templates and burst. No surprise attack, and it's obviously a rocket, but it's worth having at your side. Finally, rockets are availability 5, but only like 2 to 4 of them will actually be in your core fire team, so you can use them in camo if you want. Oh, and 2 LT options with no SWC cost, which is fantastic. So the aforementioned lack of SWC weapons. Well, if you look at the link teams, we really understand what rockets are. So mechanics bring Panzerfausts and mines to a core and keep it pure. Wolf brings a really strong close range punch. Patchers bring some bulk and seriously deadly templates to their fire team. However, it's the Vokalats that are the big ticket item here. They count as pure for rocket fire teams, which means in Kosmoflot gets this seriously good pure BS-15 core linked, totally immune missile launcher or heavy infantry platform, and for cheap. 4 Rockhots, 1 paramedic is 35 points in its most cheapest form. Then you slot in a heavy infantry, it's just incredibly cheap and very strong. This is not Pan-Oceanian core link levels of ballistic skill, but it's still very good. Overall, I use Rockhots to power cores or heresies, maybe even cheap lieutenants with 2 duplicates, or cheap orders and corner guards. They're solid line infantry, if not entirely outstanding in some way, like Volunteers' cheapness, Gulam and Fusiliers' usefulness, or Morats just looking cool. Damn, what a unit! A lot of people call the Unknown Ranger Pretty Push the best Ariadnian unit, and honestly I'm not going to disagree. Does it need nerfed? Probably not, but it's damn good. Why? Well, it's BS13, a wild card, 6-2 movement, CC23, which I'll talk about a bit more in a minute, phase and whip 13, and arm 4. And all this on a light infantry. It also has NWI, Specialist Operative, Takeover, Stealth, Min-3, and MSV1. We're not done yet, it also has Martial Arts Level 2 and Natural Born Warrior. It's just packed with the good stuff. Min-3 in the MSV1 with the wild carding I think is the biggest thing about him here, because to be honest, it's very easy to put him into a good core or Harris, drag it up the field and start making people without visors taking -6 to hit him. And all this is while you ignore 3 of their mimeticism. So to see this in action, look at my recent battle report and the Unknown Ranger and the Boktar, which are fairly similar units, and just see how they dominate the respective lists. Given that he has an AP Spitfire option, I'm not sure what the Unknown Ranger can't fight into. Maybe the Vostok and maybe the Avatar. So in shooting, he's wild, and well, he's tactically aware, which means he's amazing and can run up the board, but he can also sneak up on things with stealth and either chain cult them or walk into melee with a damage 14 T2 or shock CCW, and if your opponent wants to smack you back, they'll have to deal with Martial Arts 2, which is pretty common, and then they'll have to deal with Natural Born Warrior, which means you now ignore any martial arts, which turns a coin flip into a 6-point swing in your favour, meaning meleeing him is not an ideal choice. Finally, we have the profiles. Just always take the AP Spitfire. I don't think anyone takes the other versions, but let me know if you do, because the AP Spitfire is such a lovely gun on a massively refined unit. See my other 2 reviews on the War Core, but long story short, take the War Core, love the War Core, watch it stand up, stun and waste orders as an ARO piece. Only take the 360-degree visor version, and Wallace can make it regular. So I mean, the War Driver isn't an Isabel, and they don't make a pure Rockhawk core, and maybe it's useful in like 4 ITS missions. It's an option. The Evo gives a seasonal +1 order for like 2 missions, and honestly if you're taking one, a Rockhawk Harris with a paramedic, 0 pain version, and a shooter will get the War Driver into the midfield to touch buttons. Alternatively, it does have 6th Sense, so maybe put this plus a Repeater Mule to zone out for your tag from threats. Ironically, this is a better pick in a less high-tech faction. Our Rodinia mandated Sniper Commissar and the Zenit is not bad. Some really nice guns and skill options here, and even more camo. So BS 12, camo -3, BS attack +1 damage, and shock. And decoy means that this is a good ARO piece to waste order, and it's pretty good in the active turn. It's probably equally as good, if not better than the Cataran, in fact, but it lacks the great mobility and CC, but it gains a lot in the weapons department. Profiles are pretty standard for Ariadna Camo, although this one more draws directly from TAC with decoy, stealth, the aforementioned damage and shock, and it rocks an AP sniper and an AP marksman rifle, which is really nice to hunt heavy infantry and medium infantry with its damage 16 snipers and 14 marksman rifles. Tags will do well to avoid this unless they have min or a visor, smokeless/bad smoking warbands as well, since with the surprise attack there are just no real good options against it. It would be massively improved with Climbing Plus and Super Jump, but that would really sort of eke into the Cataran's niche unnecessarily. It has 2 specialist options in the Forward Observer Sniper and the Chain of Command AP Marksman Rifle. The Forward Observer is about 3 points too much by my account, but you get some excellent range bands with the Light Shotgun and Sniper. I might try out to hunt things with high armor. Although the one I tend to take is the Chain of Command one. Yes, it's 30 points, but it helps me sleep at night whenever I take Wallace or Rockhots as my lieutenant. But also it's a really nice backup specialist that can run in and push buttons at the last minute. Overall, it's a very solid support piece. When the Stranic was first shown, it wasn't exactly setting the world on fire, even if he was pretty cool looking, but as soon as the Fireteam update dropped, it all made sense. A wildcard Doctor isn't amazing in Kosmoflot due to the lack of cubes, but the wildcard medkit is, especially on BS12 and ARM 3. Really, it's the only profile used for him, but it's also a wildcard specialist. So often I'm taking these Stranic and Fireteams where I don't have access to a medkit, or he can get it there for cheaper. Soldat Heresies are pretty common, but I also can see him being used in Varangian Fireteams. Overall, he's a really fantastic 19-point medkit, and is honestly largely worth it. I really must suggest you watch my Caledonia unit guide video for a more detailed examination of the Scots Guard stat line. Long story short of the profiles, Camo Missiles for defense, Camo Spitfire for cheeky Camo Assault. In Kosmoflot though, these guys are a slightly different beast. With lacking purity, it's a bit of a pain to figure out a pure fire team. The issue is, without a second wound state, I do worry for medium infantry fire teams thanks to templates. But if you want a decent non-unknown ranger shooter, I think the Scots Guard AP Spitfire, Frontoflick, AP Sniper, and the Stranic Doctor could be a really good hunting fire team, as I've used it before in round 1 of the IGL Highlander. As I've mentioned in my round 3 report, I reckon there could be a pain train involved with the Scots Guard at its core, with the Unknown Ranger, the NCO SMG Scots Guard, Vauclaat Missile Launcher, a Stranic Doctor, and then maybe whatever last member you want. An Engineer Frontoflick might be good for cards, but so might Cadian for CC defense and arbalative wounds. Overall, I like the Scots Guard, but I feel like sometimes they can fall into the medium infantry trap of being expensive and needing a place. I don't personally like paratroopers, and I've never used equipping Mirage 5, so I feel a little under-equipped to discuss this trooper, but I feel we can talk about it on reputation alone. It's equipping Mirage 5. Durok is feared across the game because he's a 2-wound, martial arts 2, total immune dog warrior that can come down in your deployment zone, smoke and then just template anything that moves. And he can cover a French woman who drops in with an AP rifle and shoots stuff on BS-14. Essentially a combat jumping moblot. She can also spec fire as well for fun with a grenade launcher. Or you can drop her in first to snipe out the things that she can handle but Durok can't. Then Durok comes in, post-slaughter of course, like the mini-tag that he is, and just cleans up the survivor with that AP CCW on damage 17. So just more flattening stuff. Yeah, it's pretty obvious that they're coming in Kosmoflot, but I mean, if you can master the deployment zone runs with these two, it's a hard thing to deal with. It's one of these units that, if your opponent even gives you an inch, if you're smart, you can absolutely take that mile. So the Cosmos Soldat is like a Mormor, but slightly worse, which is fine, but it could be better. Let's talk about it and why I still like him a lot. So first off, theory time. Every loved Ariadnia Sectorial has two types of heavy infantry. Cheap assault heavy infantry and big and chunky heavy infantry. In Caledonia that's the Greys for cheap and the Mormors for chunky. In USARF it's the Minutemen for light and cheap, then the Blackjack bringing the chunk. TAC has the Veteran Kazat and the Rachniks for its two. Stretching it there, but I think my point kind of roughly stands. In Kosmoflot we have the Volks and Patchers for cheap and assault heavy infantry. The Soldat is here to be the girth on the table, and that can cause some real issues for your opponent. So does he do that? Well, I think yes, but with some asterisks. He is BS 13, Fizz 14 but Dodge 11 for sins with smoke most likely. No wound in cap, Arm 6, BTS 3 with 1 wound. This is where the Armata project has come to. It's a nice heavy infantry, it's a very good heavy infantry stat line, like 23 points for all this. That's really good for no frenzy. Weapon wise, it's a banger in each profile. He's got AP heavy pistols on each profile, which is solid in case a warband tries to gank him, but then the big guns. He has an AP HMG plus 1 damage, which is just shy of the Mormors. a portable autocannon with MSV1, which is absolutely fantastic, and a specialist operative profile with an innate burst 4 T2 rifle, heavy flamethrower, and Panzerfaust. Each one does cost a fair bit, but I can't say any of them are bad. Now, here's where my issue with him is. Being the poster child of Kosmoflot, besides the bear and the Vokalat, he can only harass with himself, a Frontovlik, and wildcards, and he's only availability 2. It's not great for him. It's good, but not great. I do use it though. I tend to build for the AP HMG, Frontovlik Engineer, and the Stranic Doctor, although a Frontovlik Paramedic could work since the Kosmosoldat does still have that Phys 14. If I was to take the portable autocannon version, which I'm very tempted to do when I can, I would still do a Stranic Doctor for healing and a Frontovlik AP Sniper to work as a sniper, spotter, team for aggressive ARO and active drop zone to drop zone fighting. You can run the portable autocannon more aggressively, swapping the AP Sniper to an AP Spitfire and keeping the Stranic. Or you could lean into the girth and cheap aspect of Kosmoflot and do the AP HMG Soldat, portable autocannon Soldat, and the Stranic, and that will pretty much deal with anything outside of min-6 beasts. The Spec Ops profile, I'm not sure what I want to do. Maybe I do Unknown Ranger, Stranic, or Patcher, or the last Harris with the portable autocannon replaced with this guy. I do have to admit, I love the fact that he does have MSV available to him, and I would love to see an X-Visor option, probably on the T2 rifle profile. I also love it a lot more if he could core. The Kosmoflot core is right there, and that would be a good option to make a really flexible if in pure core. Overall, the successor to the Mormare is a good unit. I often take alongside bears as the main punch in my list. So I'm not sure if this is CB finally letting us have 2-wound heavy infantry, or if CB needed a use for the tag raid diggers in Kosmoflot. Either way, who cares? Patchers are wild. So the art is basically just a Terran Marine or a Firebat from StarCraft, and I don't mind that look. Once we get the model, it will be fantastic. If not, I'll just use a Diablo. So what do we get in the Spaceman Craig? Well, we get BS-12 and CC-16. Okay, but not astounding. Fizz and Whip 13, and that's a specialist, which is nice. Arm 3 and BTS-3. But he's hackable like the Soldat, which unfortunately is the thing. But he's got 2 wounds, but that degrades. It has Climbing Plus, which is really nice, Terrain 0G, and what's that? Immunity to Continuous Damage. Yep, so that's immune to flamethrowers, which is really nice. Well, I mean, it'll still do damage to you, but it won't keep doing the cascading rolls, which is what always kills me. Profiles, now we see why we don't have lots of BS or CC. We have a Vulcan shotgun +1 burst, so that's burst 3 AP, or basically 3 shots with a light flamethrower +1 damage. We have an acrylic cannon, so you can glue someone you don't like. This profile is kinda nice and can be used in something like Armory or in a Harris where you want to push him up to nail something big and expensive and trade well. Alternatively, and my preferred one if you're running him in a fire team, is the heavy flamethrower +1 burst. So that's 2 large templates, an adhesive launcher, burst 2 power, which means you can move closer to flamethrower them, and then finally grenades continuous damage. Finally, more Molotov cocktails. This guy is a wild card, so getting that +1 burst is incredibly easy, and now he can very easily end up with 4 shots on BS-19 with that Vulcan shotgun or light flamethrower templates basically. And that second profile though, that's really nice. Burst 3 heavy flamethrower, burst 3 ADHL, which is basically a para rifle, which is very nice, and burst 2 grenades, which is a nice cherry on top of the very nice cake. But what if we get Purity with the Rokos? Oh boy, did you know that team got better before the Volks. Pure BS-21 with burst 4 AP Vulcan shotgun shots within 8 inches of course, 15 BS base for your para rifle, which is great, but much more than that is the Fizz 16 grenades with burst 2. If you're within 8 inches, that's 2 circular templates on 19. This means you can speculative attack on 13s within your good range. Overall, this is a seriously good close shock assault heavy infantry that doesn't just fall into close combat. So here is our other shock assault heavy infantry, the Volcalat, but also our shooter, and it's an odd one. CC22 and Natural Born Warrior, so like other Ariadnian lads and ladies, he can melee okay with an AP CCW with damage 14. BS12, which is deceptively weak, phase 14 with grenades, so see what I just said about Patchers, but again on 20s within 8. He is whip 12, and honestly that might even be a bit bloat here since Rockot's Discover Pure on 16s. He's arm 4, BTS 0, and that's fine because he's totally immune. Just totally immune. No vulnerability, so this might be our counter to Hack Islam, honestly. That means that he is arm 7, immutable in cover. To top it off, he has no wound end cap, super jump, making him similar to a Hollow Man, and courage and dodge to round it off. So earlier I was saying about how Rockots don't really have SWC weapons. Well, here they are. We get a missile launcher, HMGs, damage 14 T2 rifles, and Mark 12s. All with a burst 2 chain cult, grenades, and heavy pistols, which again is all fantastic. So this deceptive BS12, well, you'll notice that in the fire team bit he's pure with Rockot. I mean, it's not very expensive to get a BS15 Fizz 17 for grenades, which makes our ARO game very strong. Now we have burst 2 BS15 missile launchers with 2 wound states and total immunity. Basically, burst is his counter, but he dodges in 14s, which, while is not the same as smoke dodging or the bear, is still pretty good. Or maybe you risk it and go well and take a HMG, 2 Patchers, a Mechanic and a Rockot and give yourself a big aggressive core to walk up the board and just burst things down. The only downside to him is that you need a core to push up that ballistic skill on him, and while I think a Harris of him, a Specialist, is another piece, I think he's still better suited to a pure core or otherwise. The Chernobog is Ariadna's main battle tag, and it's such an Ariadnan main battle tag, and make no mistake, it definitely is one. It's BS 14 with 3 wounds, arm 8 and an AP, damage 16, HMG. All the hallmarks of a main battle tag. The downside is that it's only guided -3, not -6. It's dodge and gizmo kit on Fizz 9 despite being Fizz 17, and it transmutates after 2 wounds. It's manned, which means no rerolls, but we can't all be Pan-Oceania. The second profile is good, just 1 wound, and BS 13 is fine, so it's a main battle tag with a twist, but why is it Ariadna's main battle tag? Well, it's 65 points for all this, a heavy flamethrower, and some chest mines. You know what else, tag-wise, is in this range? The Nomad Iguana, which is pretty meh, the Military Orders Teak Belong, which is very, very good, and the Gecko, which is okay. You know, light tags. The other profile is also very nice as well, as the heavy rocket launcher helps with its burst 3 templates, so you can tag and kill fire teams. You lose the heavy flamethrower though, and it's only a 7-point increase, which seems fair. What I really like about the Chernobog though is that it's a plain and simple tag that just works, but like it's so cheap you can still bring a full Kosmoflot list around it. For 90 points with a tag in other factions you're getting stuff like Cutters, Sphinx, Maruts, good tags, but for 90 points in Kosmoflot you can get a basic Chernobog and a bear. It can duel with itself and wildcards if you need it to do that, but I'm not one for tag duels. Finally, we have tons of engineers to come along and help the Chernobog with 4 profiles and a total availability of 12 on our engineers. They're all whip 13, so go with our new help bots and we can support that tag fairly well. The V5 Electronic. So I mean it's a helper bot, a bad helper bot, but you know what, that's fine. It's 2 points and it's still min -3 and only 4/4 move though. So it gives a backline engineer or doctor the safety to heal tags, bears or whatever while the controller does its own thing. The other option, and how I tend to use it, is putting it on an Armandito and watching it run up the board with burst 2 recharges. So mules exist, I guess. Go see my CHA review for my complaints, but to remind you, it's a BS 10 TR bot with burst 3 and rifle range bands. The 5-point order is now kinda nice as we have less cheap troops in Kosmoflot. We get the Kayushka for guided missile strikes, which I guess pairs well with the war driver we have. I think it might actually be better in Caledonia as we have 2 hackers there, and I didn't rate these guys in Caledonia. In saying that, with the temporary repeater takeover option, we can now sort of defend the Chernobog from hackers and warbands, or bring the total reaction bot and hide him somewhere sitting next to an engineer or helper bot to improve our defences. Expensive, but I still think I prefer the Scots missile. Pavel is the butt of many of my jokes, as he just sort of exists in a faction with Cadian, Wolfgang, the Unknown Ranger, and Uxia, who all just sort of edge into his space. In TAC I'm sure he's great, but he's a little costly here, but he's really like a Cataran on steroids in some ways. Why? Well, he's CC23 with Martial Arts level 2 and Natural Born Warrior, which is wild. He's surprisingly good at melee alongside the other aforementioned melee guys. Besides this, he also has a T2 CCW and D charges, which is an absolute menace in close combat. He's also BS12 with Camo -3 and Surprise Attack -3, which works as the Cataran shows. He uses the Ochotnik, which is a mix of a sniper and an AP marksman rifle. He's finally Whip and Fez 13, which is nice since he's a specialist, but he is only arm 1, wound 1. The extra sauce on the skills is the forward deployment 8 inches, so he can start in the midfield with Berserk +3, terrain total, and frenzy. This means you can basically hunt anything uncamoed in the midfield. The minor issue is that with Berserk he only has 1 wound and no second wound state, which means he has a good chance to just die once the Berserk is done. So pick your targets and use the camo as much as possible to get there safely, or avoid berserking and use the surprise attack to murder things. He is also expensive and can't re-camo to help with survivability if he frenzies. So you need to be really smart when you use him. Snipe something, move into the midfield, take an objective, snipe something else, maybe berserk a tag or something expensive when you've got your money worth from him. Overall, he's a really nice, multifaceted piece, but he's costed pretty fairly for it. Right, so the SAS are basically the same here as in Caledonia. I always aim to bring 2 because they are just solid zone of controllers with chain rifles, martial arts 2 and CC22. This thing can sneak up and wallop something on a -9 if it decides to shoot you, or a -6 if it wants to CC you back. Oh, and they have D charges in the forward observer version. Profile wise, it's the same story. There are only 2 profiles to care about. The crap one and the forward observer one, because they are just good at what they do. The crap in firefight and the forward observer in missions where you need specialists. Remember, as good as SAS are, they're still very squishy with arm 3 and Fizz 13 for dodging. So use stealth or camo to approach your target that you want to forward observe, flash pulse, slap with templates, or slap with melee. The profile gives you a lot of tools to just walk up and do your job. Just think before you act. Finally, don't over-infiltrate these guys unless you have 3 and want to risk it. The over-infiltration is for Uxia. I think Uxia might be better here than in Caledonia. She's the SAS on steroids. She gets a lot of things, but it offsets it with frenzy. And importantly, she gains the infiltration +6 skill. That's 16 to be right in your opponent's face. Of course, she has camo as well, which basically makes it impersonation light. She starts in a marker state, so reserve her and drop her down and either slowly pick apart your opponent's hackers and cheerleaders, or find something big to walk up and punch it with stealth and blast it with a shotgun or D charges. The popular profile first is the Spec Ops one. This means she can steal buttons and do skill stuff. She rocks a boring shotgun for blasting, not bad. D charges, smoke grenades, which means she can now approach and melee people at her leisure, or stop an ARO piece from doing their thing. Finally, she has assault pistols +1 burst, so that's either burst 5 at close range to offset her not great ballistic skill, or +1 burst in melee, guaranteeing a win in the face-to-face roll. She also has an AP CCW in case she need it, which she won't, because she'll probably be dead by the time she's out of D charges. So how do you use her? Well, like a missile who will absolutely murder whatever you set her towards, and when you do it, she might even proc her frenzy and become impetuous. But if she lives long enough for that, I would be shocked. Turn 1, just try to do as much damage as possible with her. It should not take much to get your points back here. So ignore the second profile. MSV1 is better used in the Unknown Ranger, Soldat and Frontovlik. Dud profile aside, Uxia is a fantastic piece, and many try to fit her into every list. taker to push buttons, or spender to cripple your opponent before they even know what's happening to them. The Ariadnia Defiance character that is now in Kosmoflot. Cadian, basically he might be the single best melee character in Ariadnia on skill and dice rolls alone. It's very close. Why? Well, he's CC 23, Martial Arts level 2, Berserk plus 3, Natural Born Warrior, and 2 wounds with a damage 15, AP plus T2 CCW. So very much anti-heavy infantry and tag. I talked about this in my tag slaying video, but if you wound anything with Cadian, you're likely to kill, but getting that one successful wound through is harder without double action. As before, he stomps in melee and his prime targets are all Warbands thanks to his 2 wounds and arm 3, and heavy infantry that thinks it can melee. Punch up as expensive as possible or trade for as much as possible. The profile is okay on him, but he's a wild card with no tags, so I think you want to bring him in situations where you've not got a pure core or a Harris. So maybe a Soldat HMD, Cadian and a Stradic, or the Unknown Ranger, Cadian and a Varangian or Rockot. Or maybe in place of the Volk or Patcher in a Pain Train. But well, here's the rub. Other units sort of do his job equally or better. The Unknown Ranger does the wildcard shooter thing better, which makes sense, Cadian isn't a shooter. Then he does the CC pretty well too. So you don't need Cadian to protect him, unless it's for arbulative wounds, but then a Patcher or Varangian can do that for cheaper with templates and smoke. If you want to bring him with Rockets or the Kosmoflot fire team, it gets expensive pretty quick. In general, I think there's far more support for him here in Kosmoflot, but I feel all the all-stars push him out. In saying that, one fire team I might suggest him is in the Kosmoflot or Cosmosoldat fire teams as much needed melee protection. I do think he really suffers from the Unknown Ranger's CC skills and the lack of his own smoke. Finally, a duo with a Varangian to smoke up the board and maybe coordinate a Berserk with him could be a really good combination to deal with big expensive pieces that aren't good at melee. Armandino are the attack engineer warbands with booty and, in my opinion, very much sitting on the council of warbands, but not ranked a true warband. Like, okay, they're impetuous and irregular, so they're dirt cheap. They have OK CC with D charges and AP CCWs on Fizz 14, so very nice. And it has smoke, which is also fantastic. But here's my problem. It has booty with BS 10, which is kinda naff because I hate rolling in deployment and I always forget. It can be useful to open up new attack vectors. Cheeky impetuous sniper on BS 10 might do something if your opponent wasn't planning for it. They're an engineer without gizmo kits, which means they can't just pew pew or REMS up, they actually need to move into base to base contact and touch the afflicted soul. Although what I do like about him is that he's really cheap. 8-point irregular orders for Wallace, a specialist, and availability 4, which is very nice. So what do you do with them is that you take 1 or 2, impetuous up to the midfield, and push a button, which is not impossible on Whip 13. Then you can find something and suicide them into, or force weak skirmishers to try and tangle with you, and then you just template them when they get too brave. Overall, I don't like them as traditional warbands, but say as midfield objective grabbers who can't take cover, free orders, and defend stuff with templates and decharges, I like them a lot. Right, now here's the one you probably want to hear about. The absolute Chad of the meta, destroyer of lifts, the impetuous, irregular, Bearpo. I don't know what I was doing there, I'm sorry. So basically he's the same as the regular bear, except he's impetuous and irregular. So he's technically cheaper, but he's a little bit more after all the bonuses he gets. Such as Blitzkill 11 rather than 7, heavy shotgun +1 damage, but no grenades. That heavy shotgun though is damage 16 AP or a damage 16 small template, so that will pick apart most things. So what's the difference on the table? Well, he's here to be a furry missile, more like a traditional Dog Warrior, McMurray or Cameronian. He will advance and just smoke on 19 so he can find something expensive, then berserk it or blast it to death with a heavy shotgun. You're still total immune with 3 wound states, and you can berserk up a wall 10 inches thanks to the new climbing plus rules. Then you just smack things with an AP CCW or DA Trench Hammer on damage 18. Your choice, I recommend DA unless it's the Avatar or the Yotam. Once this gets into the backfield, God help your opponent unless he's rocking a lot of total reaction, neurosynetics, jammers, as you will just be able to hunt things, so make sure he doesn't have a Sundukbot or TR bot. That is one picnic basket to avoid. Varangian guards are the O12 Merc come Kosmoflot that I honestly have nitpicky comments about in terms of space they take up. It's just a Caledonia player whining, so I'll start with the useful bit. So it's CC23, BS10, well they're Warbands so it doesn't really matter, Fizz 14 which is very nice with that AP, CCW, and smoke dodging on 17s. He's Whip 13 for some reason, he's Arm 2 which is really nice to stay alive a little bit longer. He has Berserk plus 3, Dogged, Courage and Religious Trooper, and Impetuous. Fantastic warband, exemplar of the classification. However they're regular, which is fairly nice for things like O12 and Kosmoflot without Wallace, but it's a little odd, but again, very nice. Oh yeah, it's heavy pistols as well, which adds to the cost, but it means it is a nice anti-warband weapon. Kosmoflot also gains access to the 9-point version, which is nice and simple chain rifle smoke grenades profile, which drops the odd blow from the rest. SMGs are fairly cheap and nice, but I do wonder why they're on Blisk skill 10 models. But a gun with burst is still good from my experience, so there seems to be a method to the madness. Finally they added a trench hammer profile, which is a super nice when you really need something dead. Right, so my issue, like why do Varangians exist, especially in Kosmoflot? Like no seriously, the lore behind them is that they are literally CHA troops from the Ariadnia Expeditionary Force who decided just to become mercs. Which is fair, Dawn is an awful planet to live on, but Catarans are also soldiers of fortune. Also, if you're perceptive, you might notice that these are just regular Galwegians with submachine guns, which I have to stress is a very nice addition to the unit, but why not just add Galwegians to Kosmoflot and give it a regular profile or something? To be honest, it could be more unique with the SMGs and the techno-Ariadnian design of the models, but why are Galwegians not in Kosmoflot but still being sold? Maybe Corvus Belli wanted the new look for Kosmoflot and wanted to keep the Galwegians firmly in old Ariadna, and that's fine and that makes perfect sense, but part of me pauses when I think about this. Again, this is such a minor complaint of mine, I am only just doing it because it's my video. So back to being helpful again, Varangians often make it into a list, even with bears, as it fills a slightly different role, where they can suicide into my unimportant but expensive enemy units and trade up. It has a good swath of profile options and I recommend all of them except the boarding shotgun profile. If you need AP within 8 inches, just berserk him. Finally, you can link with Wallace if you want. I'm not sure why, but why not? Wallace, Varangian, Unknown Ranger, Patron of Volk is one hell of a pain train. Alternatively, you can beat the Smoke Buddy for one of your wild cards as needed, maybe Cadian, maybe the Unknown Ranger. William Wallace, the bad boy of Caledonia, returns and he is still pretty good. Thanks to less irregular troopers in Kosmoflot, he's less of a requirement for the Sectorial though. His profile remains pretty good and I've begun to think of the non-lieutenant version as like a mini bear or souped up Varangian, and with chain of command in your army, the lieutenant can be too. See my Caledonia video for the breakdowns of stats, but he can still hit BS 16 pure with a Varangian link pure only. He has a T2 rifle plus 1 damage, but more usefully to him he has smoke with CC 24, Berserk plus 3, and a damage 15 explosive close combat weapon with natural born warrior and a second wind state. So this means he can do a lot of damage to attack or heavy infantry with some comfort. He's a Whip 15 lieutenant, so it's fairly obvious, but again we have chain of command, so it does not matter if you hide the Zenit well enough. I don't actually take him often in Kosmoflot compared to Caledonia, but when I do, it's such a nice boost to take those cheaper regular options, but it's not like a must in Caledonia. If I had to rank inspiring leadership units, I'd rank Caledonia Wallace at the best, then Joan and Vanilla Pan-Oceania, then Wallace and Kosmoflot, and then a long way at the bottom is Joan and Military Orders. Why? Well, we have availability 9 irregular orders, but of that we usually end up taking around 2 or 3 or maybe up to 5 in some situations, so it's nice to get them turned over to regular orders. We have a lot of stuff with courage, so that's not really needed, but the coordinated order, especially with access to attack, is really nice when paired with a heavy rocket launcher, Catarans, Scots Guard, Zenits and Patchers. Lots of dilemmas you can create for your opponent there. We also have like 2 NCO profiles, so it's unlikely the Lieutenant Order is going to get used by that. The retreat immunity is pretty useful since you can fit a lot of things into Wallace in 39 points. So how do I use him in Kosmoflot? Well, the same as Caledonia, unfortunately. I'm a bit of a coward unless I'm paying those 30 points for the chain of commands in it. Otherwise, he's a solid solo piece that can duel with Varangian, which is a bit unnecessary since he carries his own smoke, templates, berserk, and shooting. Overall, I recommend Wallace as a solo warband piece that can compete with bears, but has the advantage of not being big and scary, but a kind of equal threat. Or you can use him as a lieutenant to leverage Catarads, Armandino, and the bear pod. Wolfgang is our Wolver in Kosmoflot, and he's a bit of a pickle. Wolfgang is a really good character in a faction with really good melee users, but he does have the rare quality of being Silhouette 2, True Wounds, and Armed 3 and BTS 3. CC 23, Martial Arts Level 3, Berserk plus 3 means it's very easy to smack things with a damage 16 DA CCW on 28 or 25. No Natural Born Warrior, which is a shame because I thought he had it before. Alternatively, you can boot people with a -9 thanks to his Para CCW -6, which has its uses. To get to melee, he's okay. He's VS 12 and Fizz 14 with a good dodge with a +3 mod. No smoke, but I think that's fine since it's basically the same, if not better, since it can't be affected by MSV. Weaponry wise, he's got a multi-rifle, which is rare in Ariadna, but also +1 burst, and a chain cult, so within 16 inches, he's absolutely deadly. Although, I think he will need to be paired with a shooter for beyond 16 inches. So where does he sit in Kosmoflot? Well, oddly enough, in the fantastic Rock-Hot Fire team. He's unfortunately one of the few units that don't give purity next to the Kazakh Doctor and the War Driver, which is not great. I prefer if he be a wildcard, but I guess KD needs something. Or maybe at least pure with the Rock-Hots. This means he utterly lacks smoke and doesn't get purity, so he's maxed out on BS 13 and this isn't good for him. I'm trying to figure out how to use him the best, but I think a Harris or maybe a pretty bulky core as close range fire support. Maybe the Unknown Ranger Wolf and a Paramedic Rock-Hot, or the Volk HMG Wolf and Paramedic. We lose a lot of shooting, but we gain a lot of bulk in those fire teams. I will finish this off by saying this is a good solo piece on a map where you can avoid longer fire lanes with him, as he could do room-to-room combat fairly well, especially with Berserk. It's worth taking him if you like him, but I'm yet to do it. And that was my video on the units of Kosmoflot. I really hoped you enjoyed the video and you now have a better understanding of the Sectorial. Please remember to like and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching.